Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Friday, coming up on 11:15 a.m. Eastern Time. And we're jumping on with a live stream at this time of the day because we are waiting for the National Hurricane Center's first advisory on Subtropical Storm Alberto. And it looks as if, certainly based on what we've been watching evolve on the satellite loops since yesterday, that this system was becoming better defined and better organized. There was evidence, certainly, of a broad circulation. And as a result, we have the season's first tropical storm. For some reason, my satellite loop decided to flip. So let me just unflip this and give me 1 second here. Actually, you know what? I think it'll just be easier. I'm going to pull up a loop. I'm kind of doing this on the fly. So just bear that in mind with waiting for the National Hurricane Center to do what it needs to do with sending out advisories, which have not hit as of a couple of minutes ago, but they will do so shortly. So I think we'll be hopefully on the air when those advisories come out. And I'm just guessing here, but I'm anticipating that one of the reasons, and we discussed this yesterday with respect to the Hurricane Center, in that they had a dilemma here. They needed to. They needed to. I can't believe this is happening. Okay, let me try. I'm trying to flip this correctly here. Hang on 1 second. All right. You know what the easiest thing to do is? Just start from scratch. Unreal. Oh boy. So you know what? We're gonna put it in this one. I think one of the big dilemmas that the Hurricane Center had yesterday was the fact that they've got this holiday weekend here, and with Memorial Day holiday weekend, and this is a big getaway day, big travel day. If they wait too long to put up some kind of watches or warnings, a lot of people will probably not get the message. Although I kind of tend to think, in this day and age, that's almost hard to imagine given our addiction to news and social media. But they certainly have to put these things as part of the equation, and that they had to figure out what to do. It does seem to me like this thing looks like, at the very least, it is a subtropical storm. What makes this not truly tropical, if you look at the signature on the satellite, is that the actual center is still pretty close to the Yucatan Peninsula. Most of the weather with this is north and northeast of the center. There isn't really that much, if anything at all, on the west side. When you see the visible come up, you can see there are some clouds there, but we don't see a whole lot of convection. There's a lot of dry air on the west side. So it does have a bit of a sheared look. The other thing I would point out is a lot of the cloudiness. You see how it's streaming along to the northeast and into South Florida. I think what we're going to be seeing is an increasing chance for some significant rains as we go through the rest of the day, and particularly overnight and for Saturday and Sunday over Florida, with most of the rain on the east side. This is going to put Florida from south to north at least in line for some very heavy torrential rains into Saturday. Then, as the system perhaps becomes a bit more tropical in nature, a little bit more symmetrical, you start to get more convection on the west side. The actual system, in a sense, just kind of tightens up a bit. You might see those rains diminish a little bit and shift offshore as you go through the later Saturday into Saturday night. But a lot is really going to depend on what this does as it moves northward. So, we certainly still have a lot of things to figure out with regards to the overall equation when it comes to this particular tropical system. So let's see if we can at least we've got the new NAM, so I can show you that. I'll also check while this loads. we'll let this load up. I'm going to check real quick to see if the new advisory is out yet. I would think it's coming up to 11:15, so I'm guessing that we'll probably see it come out momentarily. But there's the new NAM toward the end of the period with it right over New Orleans. So before we speculate on that, let's see how it gets there. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to just recheck the Hurricane Center to see if we do have the, okay, so we do have the latest advisory here. So let me just, let me go over that with you, okay? So, and then we'll come back to the NAM model here in just a second. So we have Alberto's at 19.71, 86.8 west, and that's 55 miles south of Cozumel, or about 195 miles south of the southwest of the western tip of Cuba. Top winds 40 miles an hour, moving north-northeast at 6 miles an hour, so moving very, very slowly away from the coast, but it's a north-northeast movement, so it's not exactly rushing out of there, and it's only going at 6 miles an hour. So let's see what they've done here. We've got various tropical storm watches up for the east coast of the Yucatan. The Cuba has issued a tropical storm watch for western Cuba, and that's it. So I guess they are going to wait. Well, clearly they're going to wait with regards to the Gulf Coast. So other than saying interests along the central and eastern U.S. Gulf Coast should monitor the progress of Alberto. Tropical storm and tropical storm surge and storm surge watches could be required for portions of this area later today or tonight. So I think, you know, now they had to do something. Now that at least they've got the name out there. Now they have at least set the table for the probability that they're going to put some kind of tropical storm watches up for the Gulf Coast, for the eastern part of the Gulf Coast to the central Gulf Coast. So I'm thinking the Florida Panhandle to southeast Louisiana, New Orleans, somewhere in there, maybe. We'll see what they do. So let's look at what the NAM did with all of this. And we'll take a look here. And I think, you know, the models all seem to be showing the system getting into the Gulf of Mexico and actually, you know, organizing a bit. Water temperatures are in the low 80s, and this should be enough to sustain a strong tropical storm. Might even be enough to sustain something that is minimal hurricane, I guess, even though that would be an extremely rare occurrence, since there have only been 4 hurricanes in the month of May on record. And in the Gulf of Mexico in particular, which is usually a place where you don't see it at this time of year. I think the last one was back in 1862 or 1863, but the NAM, at least in terms of the signature here, would suggest that this thing will make a transition over into a totally tropical system, or a mostly tropical system, as it moves northward. I noticed slows to a crawl as it nears the Gulf Coast early Monday morning, and then moves inland. So we're going to see, if the NAM is right, at least it moves along rather than kind of stalls out somewhere offshore, which was what some of the models were doing yesterday. Also, notice over Florida, you know, you get these bands of rain that come through from time to time. A lot is going to depend on the overall structure of this system, and even into Sunday night into early Monday, we're still getting bands of tropical downpours coming up from the Northwest Caribbean, sweeping northward into North Florida and into the Southeast, which will, you know, then feed into all the rain totals that are going to occur across the South. Let's look at what the NAM does with rain, by the way, at least through Sunday night. So we're not really all the way through on this, obviously through actually, I'm sorry, this now goes out to Monday night. So I did get a couple of extra frames here. Some big rains being indicated for southeastern Louisiana on the NAM anyway. Some isolated 3-inch plus amounts in Florida, but the bulk of the rain seems to be from Mississippi, southeast Louisiana, and southern Alabama. I'm not 100% sold on this, folks. I want to see what the other models do in terms of how they handle the rain shield. I want to just look at the surface map again. I just want to make sure I got the time elements right here. So you're getting these waves of moisture going into Saturday. You see it there over the state of Florida, particularly in West Florida, more West Florida than on the West Coast and the East Coast. There's your tropical system, starts moving northward. This is by Sunday morning. At this point, starting to see bands of rain coming into the north coast of Florida. Then the NAM seems to want to edge this more northwestward. So from Sunday morning, it takes until almost Monday morning for it to come in ashore in southeast Louisiana, and then moves up into southwest Mississippi. This is going to be a real problem with regards to rain for the Gulf states for Sunday and for early next week, as we have been emphasizing the heavy rains. But I want to see what the other models are going to be doing with this. I think maybe at this point we might be able to I'm going to bring up the Hurricane Center's page, and let's see if they've got their discussion on this. And hopefully I will be able to access this. Hang on. No, I'm going to have to do this in another way. Sorry for the, let's see if I can, I'm going to have to do this another way. So just give me 1 second here. I'm going to try and bring up the National Hurricane Center's map, the forecast map that they are putting out in terms of the track. And why am I not seeing this? Bear with me, folks. It's just going to be a little... Okay, so I've got the discussion here, which is a long one. Oh, man, where is the... Bingo! Finally. Okay. Sorry, folks. This is all coming out while I'm live on the air, so a lot of this is going to wind up being ad-lib the way it is. So I appreciate everybody's patience. So here's the National Hurricane Center's forecast map with regards to Alberto and how it's dealing with it. And you'll notice, basically keeping it, at least for now, a subtropical storm all the way through its existence, although I tend to think that this has a shot of becoming purely tropical. In the end of the day, if it winds up staying more subtropical in nature, that would tend to favor the heavier rains along and east of the center, whereas if it becomes a bit more tropical, it may wind up spreading that rains out a bit more on the west side, although it'll still mean more on the east side. And also the structure of the wind field, where the strongest winds will be in north and northeast of the center, and really not too much on the west side. But here you see the track from 10 a.m. Friday, which is where we're at the moment, or at least we were at an hour ago. Very slowly creeping its way up through the Gulf of Mexico, moving northeast and then northward, and then turning northwestward with looks like near Biloxi is where they want to bring it in. But I would venture to say that there's there's some room for error here on the track. It might wind up being a little bit further to the east. I don't know if there's a whole lot of error of it being further to the west, but I'm thinking further to the east is probably your greater risk. So I think, Lou, look for what the Hurricane Center may do with this later today. In the meantime, by the way, I just want to point out One other thing is that from respect of severe weather today, I want to bring up the severe storms forecast map. And there really isn't anything going on in my neck of the woods. Having a beautiful day here, eastern Pennsylvania through southern New England, and big cities like Philadelphia, New York City, Washington, all enjoying some great weather. We've got a slight risk of severe weather in northeastern Iowa, southwestern Wisconsin, and into southeastern Minnesota. Another area of slight risk back through much of the western and central Oklahoma and parts of North Texas, and that's all enveloped inside an area of marginal risk. And also, we've got marginal risk up in the Pacific Northwest, up in eastern Oregon, much of Idaho, parts of northern Nevada, and parts of western Montana. You can see there's some rain and some thunderstorms moving through northern California this morning and into southern Oregon, so some severe weather risk today. Otherwise, you've got this general area of thunderstorms that is indicated for much of the Ohio Valley, down through the Gulf states, and of course down into Florida, where we're seeing the moisture from Alberto streaming northeastward. So let me come let me come onto the board with you guys now at this point. Hang on one second here. I should be up full screen there, and good to see everybody here. Thanks for those of you that are on this morning. I know these ad-lib live streams are it's sort of weird to just to come on in the middle of the day, but we saw what was breaking and figured this was a good chance to do it. I'm not going to be able to spend too much time here. I will, by the way, live stream at my usual time tonight at 6 o'clock, and if things go according to plan, maybe we'll do another special Joe and Joe show, Joe Rayo, Joe Cioffi, the Joe and Joe Weather Show at 6 o'clock. If we can't do it at 6, for sure on Facebook, we will do it at 9. Shelly Man Studios. Alberto is one of those names that's going to be there forever unless it makes it does something notable. The problem with the A storms is that unless they occur very deep in the season, for example, Hurricane Andrew, the first one of the season, and I believe it was 92, that was a Category 5, and we know what Andrew did to South Florida. So it's relatively unusual for an A storm, an A name, to achieve retirement, because oftentimes they either form at this time of year or in June, where they don't often become notable from a weather perspective and from a news perspective. So the A does stick around for a while. So yeah, Alberto is on the list every 6 years. It does pop up. So unless it does something, unless it makes a real genuine mark on itself for itself one way or the other, you're going to hear that name again probably 6 years from now. And this is, by the way, the third tropical cyclone that we've had in the month of May in the last 7 years, in the last 7 Mays. And this is in a month where basically the frequency of tropical systems is about 1 every 10 or so years. So it's pretty rare to have a May storm to begin with. To have 3 of them in the last 10 years is that's pretty. That's kind of remarkable, I think. I wish I understood. This is JSAABNH. I wish I understood why it's becoming a frequent term to hear stall after any form of tropical system forecasted landfall. This is not uncommon. Okay. One of the frustrating things that I am having right now, things that's happening to me right now, is the fact that I'm having to deal with. This is not a criticism of you or anyone. Just don't misunderstand me. I had somebody the other day. I live where I live on Long Island. We have a marine climate. Ocean is very cold here in the spring. The springs in Long Island and generally in the Northeast, miserable seasons. It is a miserable time of year. You can be sitting here in a marine layer with temperatures in the 40s and 50s while places not that far away are having beach weather. And it's very, very frustrating. But this happens every single year. And I have people coming up to me saying that this is something new. It's never happened before. It's part of climate change. It's nonsense, okay? From that perspective. This is not unusual. So what I'm getting at is hurricanes, if you go back and look at the history of tropical systems all the way back to 1851, but in particularly look at the ones from 1950 on, because that's where we have, a whole lot of data for. You've got storms that stalled out, that did all sorts of really crazy tracks, stuff that you couldn't even imagine how it happened until you meteorologically kind of figure out the puzzle. This stuff happens all the time. So, right now, earlier models were showing the possibility that this thing could slow down to at least a crawl because of the weak steering nature of the upper air. Apparently, the latest runs seem to want to move it along. So, we'll see. I want to see what the rest of the models do later today. Thinking might be that maybe the stall situation could be a bit less likely, but it is going to be a very, very slow mover. But there's nothing inherently unusual about the fact that a tropical system wants to slow down and stall, depending on what's going on aloft. These are not unusual circumstances. The Elite Junior wants to know if I think it will hit Louisiana. Okay, so I'm assuming, if you're talking Louisiana, are we talking southwest or southeast? I think the southeastern part of Louisiana, New Orleans, of which I used to work at. I worked and lived in for years ago. I worked in New Orleans at the WVUE TV with Bob Breck. If you're in that area, you'll know who that. You certainly know who that. You'll know that name. Southeast Louisiana might be on the western edge of the landfall possibilities, as far as I can see from what we're seeing today. So I think you're probably going to certainly see some rain. I think rain is going to be the bigger deal unless this storm really decides to wrap up in intensity for some reason. Rain is going to be the bigger deal than anything else. I thought they were more likely to dissipate than stall. Okay, one of the things with the stalling is, and in terms of dissipation, it depends on where. If it stalls, even if it stalls inland, if part of the circulation remains off the coast, just like Harvey last year, even though for a while that circulation was inland by about 50 to 75 miles, the center of it was, a large part of the circulation of Harvey was over the Gulf of Mexico. So this not only kept the storm basically on life support in terms of keeping the winds up maybe a lot longer than they otherwise would have been, but it also kept the circulation over water, pumping in more and more moisture. And then when the center reemerged, we had it briefly, as I remember, we had it briefly re-strengthen again, never to what it was, but it did try and reorganize and re-strengthen. But they're likely to dissipate as they move. If they move far enough inland, if there is nothing to pick it up, they may just sit over one general geographic area and basically rain itself out. But remember, that's a process that can take days and days and days. So for that particular area where it sits over and decides to rain itself out, it could be an issue. Country 117 wondering if Pensacola. Pensacola. I think in a broad area, New Orleans. If you want to draw New Orleans to, I'll say Panama City, maybe somewhere in there is where I would probably think that this thing could come on land, and I would still lean more toward the western side of that range than on the eastern side. But we're going to just have to keep in tune to see what happens as we go through later today. All right, folks, I got to call it a day because I got to get ready to hit the road and head to my job. So we'll be back tonight, as I said, 6 o'clock, roughly 6 o'clock Eastern time. I'm going to see if I can try to get Joe Rayo to, if everything's going okay with him and he doesn't have too much going on, we will do another round of the Joe and Joe weather show at 6. Otherwise, it'll be on Facebook at 9:15. Website posts are up, so you can check those out too on meteorologistjoecioffi.com. And just a quick disclaimer: we have a link to Amazon that's on the on the descriptor to this live stream and to this video. If you shop on Amazon and you go through that link, it's a great way to support what I do. And at the same time, you get your stuff, and it doesn't cost you a dime because Amazon throws me back some coins so I can get a few cigars and some coffee for my day. All right, folks, have a great rest of your Friday. We'll see you later at 6. And, of course, I'll be on this weekend, too, so we'll keep you updated on everything with regards to Alberto and the holiday weekend.